evening to those of you joining us on the western side of the world, those of you coming in from across the world, a good morning. We trust that you had a pleasant Sabbath. We had a pleasant one here. It's been a tremendous blessing. We were up early this morning to be able to begin with a memorial service for a good friend of ours. But we praise God for life that He has given us, and we thank Him that you are here with us today. So before we go ahead and begin with our program, I'm going to invite you to bow your heads for a quick word of prayer before we start our meeting here. Our gracious Father in heaven, we want to thank you for this privilege that we have to be able to assemble, to think about things that you have given us as simple remedies to help us in our situations with everyday living. I pray that we would be taught how to be able to cook, to eat, and to live in such a manner that your name is glorified through it all. I pray that you will help us to be a witness to someone else, that the world, when they hear and see that we have Jesus lifted up, would desire to be drawn to Him. I ask you once again that you would be with our audio and visual equipment, the airwaves, as well as all that we do for the cause of this ministry here. I pray that your name is glorified, that you would take control of the words of Sister Clark, and I pray that you would be with all that happens today, that we can be able to reflect your glory, that these meetings would be such that your name is uplifted. Thank you once again for those that are here, and speed the steps of those who need to be here. In Jesus' most sweetest name we pray. Amen. Wanted to be able to read you something that was in my devotional thought this morning. This is taken from the book, The Desire of Ages. This has become my favorite reading in the mornings. But on page 341 of the book Desire of Ages, I found this quote where we are told the only safeguard against his power, talking about Satan, is found in the presence of Jesus. Before men and angels, Satan has been revealed as man's enemy and destroyer, Christ as man's friend and deliverer. His spirit will develop in man all that will ennoble the character and dignify the nature. It will build man up for the glory of God in body, soul, and spirit. So as we were to be able to spend this time studying about simple things that the Lord has blessed us with, let us remember that these reflect the character of Jesus in allowing us to be able to make those changes in our homes. And these counsels that we are hearing from the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy that is for us. All right, let's go ahead and do our theme song. Just give me a moment while we share our screen so you get to be able to join us in our song. We'd like to be able to do our famous trust in the Lord in Proverbs chapter 3. Hopefully you can see our screen there. Let's see if I can. All right, hopefully you guys get to be able to see our screen. Well, let's in the Lord with all our heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. Be
thy Son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. In all our ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path.
Right. We do have Sister Gloria and Brother Anthony, Aaron Anthony, with us. We'd like to invite them to be able to do a cooking demonstration if they do have one ready for us. I believe they do.
Hi, Melvin.
Hey, Gloria. Welcome.
Thank you. Maybe we'll do the demo after the lesson today. After.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, we'll have the demonstration. Yeah, absolutely, Gloria. We appreciate you.
In the end, we'll do it.
Okay. Well, this evening we are blessed to be able to have Sister Julie Clark. We want to be able to welcome you, Sister. God bless you and your ministry, along with Dr. Clark. We want to be able to invite you now to be able to talk to us about the all-important question, why charcoal? Go ahead, Sister. We'll give this time over to you.
Okay, can you see the screen okay?
Yes, Dr. Clark. We see the screen.
Hang on. Okay. All right. Well, good evening, morning, everybody. If you don't mind, I'm just going to have a quick prayer for myself. You may listen. If you bow your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, I need you to help me with this. It's been a while since I've given this presentation, and I just ask for clarity that people will learn and hear the information well. And I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, I guess I'm not looking at you guys. I'm looking at my screen. Here we go. The lecture notes. See, hang on. I'm just having technical difficulty. I have to. Wasn't doing it earlier. My husband, when he does a presentation, he has everything memorized. And so he doesn't need speaker's notes. And so I'm trying to have my speaker's notes and It's a whole different screen. All right, so hopefully you can see it. You are the gatekeeper of your health. You decide. You will see this philosophy throughout the lecture as we go on. So where do you begin? When you begin to look at what you're going to use or what you're going to do to take care of your health, this is where do you begin? What do you run to the doctor? Do you go to your refrigerator? Do you run to your shower? Call your grandmother or your sister? We all make decisions based on what we believe and value. And let's see. So I researched about healthcare costs and found on the internet a while back these slides here that said that common preventable chronic conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, and obesity account for 75% of total healthcare spending. Now that's a lot. The key thing there is that they're preventable. It says preventable chronic conditions. And then it went on to say that people who don't smoke, lose weight, get exercise, and stick to a good diet have a almost 80%, 78% lower risk of developing chronic diseases. So those are lifestyle things you can do to help. And so with healthcare costs escalating and way beyond the cost of inflation, our healthcare system is not promoting prevention. In fact, it rarely informs patients of any alternatives to drugs and surgery. So why would you care about how much healthcare costs when you're spending someone else's money, meaning like insurance? Most people aren't really concerned. They don't think a whole lot about running to the doctor because they know they have somebody else that will pay those bills. But it wouldn't be that way if they didn't have the insurance. And if they had to pay for everything, they'd be thinking, maybe having second thoughts about just running to the doctor and trying to think of what they could do to avoid having to go in and pay those expensive bills. Now, like the law of gravity, there are laws of health, also known as natural law. So like gravity, what goes up must come down. But the same is true that when one of the laws of health are broken or neglected or ignored, then illness often results. And I advise you to learn all you can. And hopefully you're familiar with the basic 8 laws of health, which is pretty good common sense of getting your rest and drinking water and exercising, getting fresh air and sunshine, things like that. But tonight isn't about the 8 laws of health. Rather, this talk is about a very simple and yet profound natural remedy. It's all about charcoal. Historically, charcoal was first used in Chinese fireworks. And then even today, in modern pyrotechnics, fireworks, it's still used. Charcoal is used. The Chinese went on to develop gunpowder with charcoal after they invented the fireworks. And charcoal is still used in gunpowder today. Well, many are aware that often water is filtered with charcoal to make it clean. And this knowledge about cleaning water with charcoal goes all the way back to 450 BC, at least. They've been able to show that when voyagers crossed the oceans, they would take these wooden barrels and start a fire inside of them and scorch the inside of the wooden barrel and then fill it up with water. And the water would stay pure for month upon month when they're traveling across the sea. And if for any reason that the water would go bad, they would take a piece of charcoal from their wood fire and put it in to the barrel, and it would take away the rancidity and odor and bad taste. So today, charcoal is used in aquariums, charcoal filters, remove nitrates. Fish put off nitrates and the algae grows on it and scums up the inside of aquariums. And it's not just little aquariums that charcoal is used, it's big, giant aquariums around the world. They use charcoal filtration. So how about bottled water? Did you know that all bottled water is filtered through charcoal? Now, how do you take something that's dirty, filter it through something that is black, and make it crystal clean? Isn't that a bit of a chemistry, would you say? Or maybe it's a bit mysterious, intriguing. Charcoal is used in swimming pools, including Olympic swimming pools. And they say that charcoal is used out in space. Yes, because they say man would not be able to go into outer space without charcoal because they can't just flush water. They don't have water at their disposal. They have to get it up there and they have to reuse it over and over again. And it's very costly to get water up in space. So they recycle it and they use it over and over again. And it's the same way with air. They have to get the air up there and they have to reuse it. And so they're using charcoal or carbon technology to keep it clean and usable. Now, even nuclear submarines have the use of charcoal. Submarines would come to a screeching halt if they didn't have charcoal. Down there, underneath the ocean, they're breathing down there, and carbon dioxide levels increase very quickly. And so they use charcoal to scrub the carbon dioxide out of the air and keep them alive. Charcoal is used in food coloring. And which jelly bean do you think has the charcoal in it in this slide? It's the black one. Now, which grape juice here has been filtered with charcoal? This is a trick question. It's actually the white one. They do use it in food processing. They also use it in mascara and eyeliner. Your ink pens that you write with have carbon or charcoal in them. They also use it in processing vegetable oils. They use it to remove rancidity, odors, or flavor issues, and even color issues. And they remove things that they don't want there and make it the way they like most people like. Pharmaceuticals also use charcoal. Now, because of OSHA regulations, the Environmental Protection Agency made regulations for all these emissions from, power plants. Coal-fired generators will have charcoal beds to clean the sulfites and everything they don't want out of the emissions of these big plants and factories. The beer industry capitalized on the idea of charcoal and carbon dioxide. The beer industry uses charcoal to remove the carbon dioxide from the brewing process. Then they ship that carbon dioxide over to the other side of the plant and inject that carbon dioxide into a beverage that most people drink every day. And do you know what that is? It's carbonated drinks or sodas. America loves their carbonated drinks. Charcoal is used in vacuums and commercial vacuums, and air filters, hybrid cars like electric cars with fuel cells. They use charcoal in those. Charcoal is also used in gas masks. And this is where activated charcoal comes into play. Activated charcoal is where that old proverb applies of less is more. 1 pound of regular charcoal will make 1/3 of activated charcoal, and yet less is more. And we'll get back to that later. In World War I and II, they started using coconut shell activated charcoal to be able to combat gas warfare, like mustard gas was killing people in the day. And they're still using charcoal masks, but what you don't see is the charcoal here in their uniforms. They're actually wearing charcoal now in their uniforms. And it helps for chemical warfare, biological warfare, and even nuclear warfare. Now, this mask, the nurse is wearing, does everything that mask, that gas mask that the World War I and II man is wearing. And yet it's lightweight, featherweight. And these are very light. Nurses use them, and they're used in all kinds of laboratories. So those are just a few of the applications that we use charcoal today, both of regular charcoal and activated charcoal. And you can see there are multiple applications. In fact, one company says 1,000 applications today and 1,001 tomorrow. It's a growing technology. It's becoming quite popular. I've noticed over the past 10 years, we're starting to see products in the stores like charcoal brushes, and we even saw charcoal pasta in Australia. Black pasta was kind of interesting. But what about medicinal charcoal? Well, let's go back to ancient Egypt. And you've heard about mummies, right? Originally, Egyptians found that if they could bury their dead in layers of sand and charcoal, they could preserve their dead people. And that was important to them for what they believed in what happens to you after you die in the afterlife. Now, where did they ever get this idea in the first place that charcoal would preserve the flesh, the body of a deceased person? Just think about this application. If you can preserve dead people with charcoal, what about living people? Do you think maybe charcoal could help preserve living people? It's something to consider. Now, the Egyptians perfected this idea of burying the dead, using sand and charcoal, and then they started creating an embalming process that uses a derivative of charcoal. And that's just interesting. It's speculated that they learned that charcoal could preserve by looking at a forest. And a forest that's had a fire go through it, the wood stumps will remain intact much, much, much longer than a forest that is just decomposing on its own. And so that's might be where they got the idea. Now, in history, in 50 AD, long, long ago, not long after Jesus died, a Roman scientist by the name of Pliny said this, quote, "It is only when ignited and quenched that charcoal itself acquires its characteristic power, and only when it seems to have perished that it becomes endowed with greater virtue." He was describing a mystery that modern science of the 21st century capitalizes on every single day. Now, coming forward in time to the 1800s, there was a gentleman named Michael Bertrand, I guess that's how you say it, a French pharmacist or chemist. And in front of a very large group of professors and scientists of his day, he drank down a charcoal mixture that he had made. And then, right after that, he drank 5 grams of arsenic. That was enough arsenic to kill 150 men. And normally, if you were to have arsenic in you, you would have severe acute pain and vomiting, diarrhea, and death fairly quickly. It wasn't even activated charcoal that he was using, just plain charcoal at that time. But he didn't die, but he didn't suffer any ill effects. And the the scientists of the day were just amazed. It was a big deal back then. He had been previously experimenting on his animals before he actually got up front and did that experiment on himself as a demonstration. Just a few years later, another scientist, Pierre Ture, took 15 grams of strychnine, enough to kill 10 men, and then took charcoal after. And he didn't suffer even a stomach ache. It was another demonstration of something that was pretty amazing at the time. Now I'm going to read this to you. You can read along. Charcoal mixed with breadcrumbs or yeast has long been a favorite material for forming poultices among Army and Navy surgeons. The charcoal poultice has also obtained a high character in hospital practice as an application to sloughing ulcers and gangrenous sores. And recently, this substance has afforded immense relief in numerous cases of open cancer by soothing pain, correcting photor, that's an old English word for odor, and facilitating the separation of the morbid structure from the surrounding parts. It is unnecessary to mention other instances of its utility, for in this form, charcoal is now admitted to the London Pharmacopoeia and is in general use in all naval, military, and civil hospitals. That was written by a surgeon, James Bird, in England, back in 1857. That is how popular regular charcoal was in the treatment of many different diseases over 150 years ago. Wow. Let's read another one here. One of the most beneficial remedies is pulverized charcoal placed in a bag and used in fomentations. This is a most successful remedy. If wet and smartweed boiled, it is still better. Smartweed is a herb that's used for pain. I have ordered this in cases where the sick were suffering great pain, and when it has been confided to me by the physician that he thought it was the last before the close of life. Then I suggested the charcoal, the patient slept, the turning point came, and recovery was the result. To students, when injured with bruised hands and suffering with inflammation, I have prescribed a simple remedy with perfect success. The poison of inflammation was overcome, the pain removed, and healing went on rapidly. The most severe inflammation of the eyes will be relieved by a poultice of charcoal put in a bag and dipped in hot or cold water as will best suit the case. This works like a charm. This was written by Ellen White, a health reformer, in 1897. The FDA rates charcoal as Category 1, safe and effective for poisoning. There are no known adverse side effects with the use of charcoal, except for one, but I'll get into that in just a bit. Now, there was a doctor at the turn of the century, at the late 1800s, named Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. He was a medical director of Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan. And at that time, the who's who of the world went to this sanitarium for healing. He was the man who invented Kellogg's cornflakes, which is a popular cereal, breakfast cereal here in the United States. And he ran a giant sanitarium. The presidents of America, kings and queens of Europe, movie stars, Olympic medal winners, and many famous people all went to the sanitarium when they got sick. He was phenomenally successful. He took special note of listening to what Ellen White said, because they were friends. And she said, she wrote this to him on one occasion. She said, I expect you will laugh at this, but if I could give this remedy some outlandish name that no one knew but myself, it would have greater influence. Yeah, I've suggested charcoal to many people, and they give you a strange look like, charcoal? It's true. All right, medicinal charcoal is not burnt toast, and it's not charcoal briquettes that you barbecue with. And it is not a cure-all. It works for a lot of different things, but there are just some things that charcoal doesn't work for, like constipation. Now, that is the one side effect that some, not all, can have using charcoal internally. It can bind them up. It can cause constipation. But that's easily overcome by drinking lots of water and taking something very fibrous in their diet, like prunes or psyllium husk or lots of fruit to counteract that effect. Some people don't have that effect. Now, with burnt toast comment there, some people think, oh, I eat charcoal. I burn my stuff that I fry all the time. That is not the charcoal you want to eat, because burnt fats make carcinogens, and that's not what we're talking about. That is not the charcoal you want to eat. We'll get into what it is here. Let's take a look at the use of charcoal in the 21st century today. Okay, you saw the slide earlier, but I wanted to point out something on this slide. You see on the slide there's a little baby. Well, the mother of this baby was a chemist or a pharmacist. And I don't know how many degrees she had, but she was a mother. And her baby got sick. And it was not sick, but you know, colicky baby, where they just cry and cry and cry. If there's anyone listening that's been around a colicky baby or had a colic baby, we all know that nobody sleeps around a colic baby. They don't sleep. It's just crying and crying, and it's pretty miserable. Well, this mother created a product in her kitchen sink. And this simple, effective remedy utilizes the main ingredient as charcoal, and it works. This invention has made her a fortune. I don't think she even has to work as a pharmacist anymore. Imagine that. So, yes, if you have colic with the baby, you can make things at home that we can tell you about, or you can buy products now like Colic that has charcoal in it, and it really helps. Okay, hospital use. Here's a good example of how charcoal is used in modern hospitals today. There's a list there: poisoning, drug overdose, dialysis, and so on. Now, dialysis. Does anybody here know what dialysis is? Dialysis is when a person's kidneys or liver is no longer able to do their job, and they have to go onto a machine to clean out the blood waste, the blood of waste and toxins. The blood goes through or runs against a charcoal filter to clean it. And most dialysis patients have to do this at least 3 times a week. So charcoal is being used there. Poisoning. Lots of children, sometimes adults, will be poisoned. And some will survive and some won't. Back in 2001, the state of Kentucky in the United States decided that they wanted to do a program, and they did a media program where they wanted every household in the state of Kentucky to have charcoal in hand for accidental poisoning. They did a media blitz on the state, and it paid off. When they did this study, they were following 138 cases of home poisoning, and 115 children were treated in the home. The average treatment time was 38 minutes. Ideally, it'd be better if it was under 30 minutes, but 38 works. It worked. And then the average for the ones that weren't treated, that I had to go to ER for the treatment, was 73 minutes. The longer you wait in poisoning, you know that the worse it is. So in this study that they did in the state of Kentucky, half as many children vomited at home, and the state of Kentucky calculated that they saved millions, literally, by doing this. Now, how many of you have charcoal in your medicine cabinet at home? Well, like fire extinguishers, it's not something you want to have to use. But isn't it nice to have at home in case you do need it? Yeah. They say the reason people get killed in the fire is because they don't have a plan. Does it matter? Does it matter to you to know what to do if someone gets sick? Poison control centers say every home ought to have charcoal in it. And if yours doesn't, you should be thinking seriously about getting it. Now, this is just a very short list on this slide of over 4,000 plus man-made and natural poisons and toxins that charcoal is known to adsorb. Now, I'm using the word adsorb, A-D, D as in David, not absorb like A-B, B as in boy. To absorb is like a sponge, but that's not what charcoal is doing. Charcoal adsorbs. It has a tremendous surface area, and we're going to take a look at that just a little bit later. But particles, chemicals, substances attach to it chemically and bind to it. And once that poison or substance attaches to the surface of the charcoal will not let it go. You would have to heat that charcoal up to like 800 degrees Celsius before it would let go of that toxin. And so when you take charcoal by mouth, as the charcoal goes through your system and it passes through, it picks up poisons and it won't let go of them until they are eliminated from the body out the other end. So that's kind of how it works. We'll keep going here. Just as an aside, they did a study back in the 80s on cholesterol and triglycerides. They took patients and gave them 2 tablespoons 3 times a day for 4 weeks. And they were surprised to find that the cholesterol went down in these people. The LD went down and the ratio doubled, and triglycerides went down 76%. Now, if you're going to try doing this at home, you could end up constipated. Remember I said sometimes it can cause constipation. So if you were going to take that kind of amount of charcoal by mouth that intensively, just remember, you've got to take high fiber intake and high water intake. Prunes or psyllium husk or high fiber fruits to counteract that effect. All right, now let's talk a bit about medicinal charcoal. You might be thinking to yourself, why would I want to use charcoal? Well, let me tell you about iatrogenic death. That's a fancy word for a death that's caused by a physician's words or therapy. It's a cause that's not natural. The single greatest cause of iatrogenic death is the negative effects of properly prescribed medications or drugs. This makes it as the 3rd leading cause of death in this country. That's pretty sobering. This was reported in the year 2000 in an article. And they said that article was actually estimating the figures of being low because they weren't including emergency room deaths or doctor's office deaths or nursing home deaths. And these figures have increased and not decreased over time. On that list, you might see, no, it's not on that list. The next one here, nosocomial infections. That's when you get an infection when you went into the hospital with no infection and then you got one while you were there, that's nosocomial infection. And they also cause iatrogenic death. Around 110,000 will die this year or more from infections that people did not have before they entered into a hospital. Now, drugs have side effects. Many are addictive, and more disease is becoming drug resistant. In fact, some diseases, like maybe nosocomial infections, let's say, will actually spread in the presence of antibiotics. Whereas charcoal, on the other hand, is a God-given natural medicine that is safe, it's simple, it's affordable, it's accessible no matter where you go in this world, it's free of adverse side effects, it's faith-inspiring, and it's easy to use. And that's my definition of a truly God-made medicine. Now, when you think of world calamities today, do you have to look very far? Just turn on the news. I don't recommend that. But you know, there's tsunamis going on, floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, and war. It's a problem. And when things like that can happen, you have power failures, you have water contamination sometimes, transportation failure, lack of medical care. And that's why you want to know about charcoal. Can anyone see, does anyone recognize this picture? I'm trying to think of what year that was. It escapes me now, I should know that. This is when Japan was hit by a really strong earthquake, and then they had a tsunami afterwards. And the picture is the destruction of a nuclear power facility that was decimated. But did you know around the cooling systems on the extractors for these nuclear reactors, they have a bed of 12 tons of what? Yes, activated charcoal. And the activated charcoal is made from coconut, specifically from coconut, because coconut, more than any other activated carbon, will absorb radioactive matter and emissions. And so since that happened, there's a shortage of coconut charcoal now, because countries like Japan and other countries that are using nuclear power are buying up lots of coconut charcoal to be ready if something like this were to happen. And so that's had a ripple effect all the way down the chain, and charcoal prices are starting to escalate. So you'll notice when you go to buy charcoal that coconut shell charcoal is more expensive than hardwood charcoal or other charcoals, and that's why. So there's story after story of charcoal saving people's lives. Dr. Agatha Thrash, she was a medical examiner in the state of Georgia. She had a health center in Uchee Pines in Alabama. And she's deceased now, and her medical center is still there. But she said this: charcoal has amazing health properties, healing properties, I'm sorry. In fact, if I were stranded on a desert island and could only take one thing along to protect me from disease, infection, and injury, I would choose charcoal. I agree with her 100%. So what exactly is this activated charcoal? Now, this is a picture of what's called beehive ovens. They used to fill them with green wood, and they'd start a fire, and all the moisture from that cooking wood would come off and steam, but it's not burning inside because there's not enough oxygen. And so all the volatiles are coming off, the water vapor and everything, and you're left with carbon. They used to have these all over the country, making charcoal to use for melting iron and so forth. It was common back then. You don't see them as much today. Maybe they're doing it somewhere else. So what can you make charcoal from? Well, I've mentioned that you can make it from coconut shell, but they also make it from peat especially in Europe, they use peat. You can make it with bamboo. Coconut shells, very popular. Hardwood is also very popular. And they even make activated charcoal from coal, especially in China. Those are some of the sources of charcoal. Now, graphite in a pencil is a carbon product. It's layers of carbon rings. They slide off your pencil, and that's how you make markings on your paper. It's a coal product. And you can see picture around the drawing there, that's a molecular structure of its, this little, looks kind of like beehive things there. That's its structure. Now, diamond, on the other hand, is a carbon molecule. And you'll see that the cage is, that's a molecular model there. It's very reinforced, and it makes the strongest, mineral on planet Earth, the diamond, and that's a carbon product. Now, charcoal, on the other hand, really doesn't have a definitive structure. So on this slide here, this is an electron microscopic picture of activated charcoal. It probably has some fibers there, something else strewn across it. You can see it looks like a rock with lots of holes. It has a lot of surface area. If you could somehow unfold all that surface area, if you had 1 teaspoon of charcoal and you unfolded all that surface area of the 1 teaspoon, it would be enough to cover a whole soccer field or football field. And with that tremendous surface area, it grabs poisons to itself, holds them until they're eliminated from the body. So the difference between activated charcoal and regular charcoal is just that it has more surface. It's broken up more. It's more crevicey, and it has more surface area to grab poisons, meaning it's more effective. It's stronger, if you will. Now, the World Health Organization says that gastrointestinal infections cause 80% of all disease worldwide. 50,000 die every day, 5,000 a day just from cholera alone. And if anyone's ever had cholera, you know how bad it is. It's an intense infection, and you can die within 24 hours. Over 90% of the health and safety risks travelers actually suffer are preventable. And at least 50% of world travelers suffer a gastrointestinal infection. All these diseases on this screen have a common denominator of diarrhea and vomiting, both of which charcoal is known to relieve. Now, there's colobus monkeys are in Africa, but there's this one monkey colony, a red colobus monkey in Tanzania, and it's highly unusual. There's many different monkeys, but this one in particular is highly unusual. They're thriving because they're eating mango and almond leaves, which are particularly high in protein. But the problem is that the mango leaves and almond leaves are toxic in that they give the monkeys diarrhea. But somehow this monkey has figured out that if they eat burnt wood, charcoal, it won't get sick. And so they seek out, fires. They go and seek out charcoal, and they suck on the stick or eat it, and they're doing just fine. They're thriving more than any other colony of colobus monkeys. That was an interesting discovery. Now, you don't have to go to Tanzania to get food poisoning. You can go to the local restaurant, you can go to your in-laws' house, or you can just accidentally do something wrong in your own kitchen and get food poisoning. And I don't know if you've ever had food poisoning. I have. You lay there and you think, oh, my stomach, stomach cramps, and you're tossing and turning, and you're thinking, is this bad enough? Should I go to the ER? Oh my goodness, this is terrible. And you're thinking, what should I do if I go to the ER? Maybe they'll pump out my stomach and fix this. Well, if you have charcoal at home and take 1 tablespoon of charcoal powder and a glass of water, within 15 minutes, you'd be able to lie down and sleep soundly for the rest of the night. And that's the first thing they do in drug overdoses in ERs, whether you're conscious or not. They're administering charcoal. They pump it into your stomach and then pump it out to get rid of it. And yep, it's really good for food poisoning or any other poisoning. So in traveling, we've mentioned bad water, you can get bad food, bad air, infections, dysentery. Look at that word down there towards the end, anthrax. Have we ever had a scare of anthrax in this country? We did. Did you know that charcoal absorbs anthrax? Insect bites and more. I mean, travelers are taking charcoal in their luggage, and we don't go anywhere without it. I wouldn't be anywhere without it. Okay, so taking charcoal orally. I was considering drinking some for you right now, but then I'd have a big black mouth for a few minutes, and you might not like to see that. But you just mix it up in a glass of water. And I recommend that you use a jar with a lid. And so you can shake it vigorously and mix it well with that. It's kind of hard to stir. It kind of goes, it's a bit messy, but yeah, you mix it up and drink it down. It has no taste. The only thing you might experience, I mean, it looks black as can be, and you think, oh, that looks terrible, but it really doesn't have a taste. It does have a bit of grit on your tongue, from kind of like dirt, but that's just the charcoal. And sometimes you can buy really fine powdered charcoal, and you won't even have the grit. But it's easy to take it orally, and you just mix it up and drink it down like a man, right? Well, my girlfriend goes over to Africa, and here she is, and she's teaching the locals about charcoal and how to use it. And when she asked for volunteers to try the charcoal, all the women came up, and but only one man. They were like, oh, I don't know. They let the women go first, make sure it's okay, and then the man finally, one man was brave enough to come up and drink it. When you finish drinking it, do you think it's black? Yes, it's black. But did you know that charcoal was sold here in the United States by Sears and Roebuck Kellogg? That's a turn of the century, early 1900s catalog. Everything used to be ordered through catalogs. They would sell charcoal powder to clean your teeth, and that it does. It's actually quite a good thing you can do. Dip a little of your wet toothbrush in a little bit of powder and brush your teeth. Boy, you'll see a difference. You don't have to do it every day, but it works really well, and it helps your gums too. Now, we've already mentioned baby colic. It's very effective for that. My son had colic, and yes, it did work. Pink eye or conjunctivitis. It works excellent for pink eye. And you're thinking, how do you get charcoal into your eye? There are a couple different ways. You can take a rounded heaping teaspoon of charcoal into a small jar, maybe 1-2 cups of water, shake it vigorously, and then let it sit. And when the charcoal comes down to the bottom, you'll see it fall to the bottom. There'll be charcoal at the bottom of the jar. And there's this gray water. Some people call it slurry. And it's suspended. There is charcoal in the water, but you won't feel it. And that's what you use to do drops in your eyes. and it works very well. The other way you can use it is to make fomentations to the eye, where you kind of like a poultice. You put a bag of charcoal and wet it and put it over your eyes, and it will work through your eyelids and absorb the toxins, the bacteria or virus that's affecting the eye. I don't know if some of you might have heard of poison ivy or poison oak. It's pretty bad. I know I've been in the emergency room several times as a kid with this. It causes a terrible rash, and I would always end up with a face, my eyes would swell shut. And so my mother would rush me to emergency, thinking she had to do something, and they'd give me drugs and trying to get this rash down. It's, excuse me, just one moment. Had to blow my nose. Okay, it's called urushiol oil, and it only takes 1 nanogram, a billionth of a gram, to cause a rash. So 1/4 of an ounce of this urushiol oil is all that's needed to cause a rash in every person on earth. It's that poisonous. 500 people could itch from the amount covering the head of a pin. Specimens of urushiol oil several centuries old have been found to cause, several centuries old have been found to cause this rash. Well, charcoal helps and it works. So remember that. Now it works for, bee stings, wasp stings, and even ant stings. Now remember that slide I said Agatha Thrash, Dr. Thrash, she was on an island. She would take charcoal with her. She had a granddaughter bitten by fire ants, hundreds of fire ants. And her little granddaughter was just 2 or 3 years old and was screaming from pain. She had hundreds of ants on her. And Agatha grabbed her, picked her up, hopefully with a blanket, and just scooped her up and got her into the house, into a bath, and put charcoal in that bath water. And within 2 minutes, the charcoal had neutralized the poison, the venom from the ants. And the granddaughter was fine, just acting like, okay, what's next? That's amazing. That is a God-made natural remedy. Snake bites, charcoal can save your life. If you were just carrying the powder with you, or even tablets, and that's all you had, and you were bit, you would just use your spit or water or anything wet and make it wet, because charcoal needs a water bond to draw out the poison. So that's what you would use if you were out in the woods. But take it with you. I always take water when I drink to drink when I'm hiking. So you'd have water, but you can use your spit or whatever. Now, we have spiders here in the United States. You probably have some in other countries that are just as bad. This is a brown recluse spider, and its bite is extremely bad. It causes gangrenous, what do you call it? Fasciitis. It eats the poison, the venom, just eats and eats and eats. It goes all the way into the bone. So this thumb you see here on the top, that's day number 2 of the person from the bite. And then the thumb, that's the same thumb, and that's day number 9. So what's scheduled for day number 10? Amputation. And not just the thumb. They had to take a good part of the wrist also. John was bitten by a brown recluse once, and if he would have had charcoal, he would have used it, but he didn't have charcoal. What do you do? His foot hurt so bad, he found the spider in his bed. He woke up that morning thinking, what is wrong with my foot? What did I do to my foot? Well, he looked in bed, and there was this brown recluse. Well, what did he do? He limped all the way down to a creek nearby and dug out some clay. and put it in a bucket and put water in the bucket and stuck his foot in that muddy soup like mixture of clay and water and just left it there for hours. And he didn't lose any skin at all. So clay also works, but charcoal definitely works. Now, making a charcoal poultice is quite easy. If you see that recipe there, you might want to write that down. 1 cup of water, 3 tablespoons of flaxseed, and 1 to 3 tablespoons of charcoal powder. And if you ground up the flaxseed, it'll go faster, but you just heat it up. If you don't heat it up, it will go jelly-like, but heating it up makes it go jelly-like quicker. And it makes a jelly so that it holds together. Now, if you just use charcoal alone to make a poultice and you get it wet, it makes a nice paste, but as soon as it dries out, it goes back into powder form again. So you want to use something like flaxseed or psyllium or oatmeal or anything that's going to hold it together and keep it moist. Now let's see if this video will work. I have a little tiny video to show you. Here it goes. Well, it's not moving. Started to move. That video is just showing you that you can use some charcoal and water, and you put that paste in between like a bed sheet, a strip of bed sheet, or even paper towels, and you get the whole thing wet and you apply it to wherever you're trying to apply it. And then you want to keep it wet. You need that water bond. So you wrap the whole thing with like plastic wrap, like saran wrap, Glad wrap, a plastic bag, and keep it moist. And you wrap that on and keep it on. We use it overnight if we're treating something, just go to sleep with it on. And that's how you would use a poultice. Different parts of the body can be challenging to keep it on, and it can make a mess, but boy, does it work. And John's going to be talking about that with you in a few minutes. Pets and livestock, even pets can benefit from charcoal. Your pet animals can get into poison, or something's rancid in their food and they get sick, or they get parvovirus, or they get wounds, and you can use it on them too. This dog here got into something, was poisoned, and wasn't doing well, and the owners knew that if they could get charcoal into her, it would help. And so they took a syringe and just put it in her mouth, and she swallowed, and she got over that poisoning just fine. I had a little tiny baby kitten come up to our door and collapse one time in the place I was staying. I had no idea what was wrong with this kitty. And I thought, oh, what do I do? So I decided to give it a charcoal bath. I thought, well, if I can't give it orally, I'll just put it in the bath. It had dropped unconscious. It was still breathing. I didn't know what to do. So I thought, I'll give it a charcoal bath. And you can see that's my arm. I'm holding the little kitten's head out of the water, and I just massaged her or him. And even though his or her eyes didn't open, it was like unconscious. As soon as I put her into that charcoal, she started purring. And I thought, wow, praise the Lord, maybe it's going to live. After that, it was still unconscious. It wouldn't open its eyes. So I laid it in a box with a towel, and we had to go to bed. And I thought, well, Lord, I'm leaving it with you. And the next morning, I looked in the box, and there's this little kitten just sitting up, just ready to go. It was hungry. Oh, that's amazing. This same dog that I showed you just before that had gotten some kind of poisoning, then in her life decided, or somehow got torn up by a barbed wire fence. And it was a really, really nasty wound. You can see it there in the top left corner. Well, the owners knew all about charcoal, and so they took it to the vet and they stitched the dog up, and the owners used a charcoal poultice to help with the healing and to keep infection out. And when they took it back to remove the stitches with the vet was astounded. He said, "I've never seen anything heal this well with this kind of injury. What did you do?" And they said, "Oh, well, we used charcoal." And yeah, that was something. Now, if anybody raises cattle, it helps with scours for cattle. You can feed it to them. Charcoal and livestock feed. It helps cows with their mastitis, increased milk production, and all kinds of things. Pigs, it helps them. Laying chickens, it increases egg production. So they do use it with animals. And they've even, decided to study rats. And they found that if they gave rats charcoal, it increased their lifespan by 34%. How's that? Huh? All right. And have you ever heard of a green thumb? It's an expression that people use saying, "Oh, you have a really green thumb," meaning you know how to grow plants really well. You succeed in that. Well, how about a black thumb? Biochar. There is charcoal products made now that you put into your soil. And look at this here. Somebody grew a huge pumpkin. I guess they used charcoal. But look at the bottom picture. That's corn. And they use one type of charcoal on the left side and a standard charcoal on the right side. No charcoal at all in the middle. And you can see it made a difference. So you can even use it agriculturally. So there you go, a new beginning. Medicinal charcoal remedies. Does it matter which way we go when we decide what we're going to do for our health? Some say it really doesn't matter much, but they haven't learned how much it really does matter. Our choices can make a difference between, life and death, and having things go very well or being very difficult. And so this might give you some food for thought. There's an author by the name of John Dinsley, and he and his wife run a charcoal business. In the bookshops, you'll see this book called charcoalremedies.com, and it is a website as well. And they know everything about charcoal. They're the ones with that pretty tan dog that I showed you earlier. And this is his presentation. I asked him if I could use it and give it to people as well, because I think everybody should know about charcoal. And so he gave it to me, and I just shared it with you. I hope you've learned a lot, and I'm going to have my husband come and he's going to tell you a few experiences he's had with charcoal and answer any questions you might have. Okay, here he is.
Thank you, Julie. And that's always a very interesting presentation, thinking about the benefits of charcoal. And having charcoal on hand is very, very important. I've been stung by a wasp, and boy, I went looking for charcoal right quick. I didn't even try to make a poultice. I just mixed it with water and put it on the spot, and in short order, it took away the stinging. I had a patient came to me who was having ulcerative colitis. The symptoms were having mucus and blood in his stools and lots of pain. And so after figuring out what in his diet and lifestyle might have been causing that, part of the therapy was to, number one, have him take charcoal by mouth. I'd have him put a tablespoon of charcoal in a quart of water and take that twice a day. And also because the ulcerative colitis, according to the colonoscopy, was quite a bit toward the end of the colon and into the rectum, I had him doing a similar mixture of charcoal and water, 1 tablespoon per quart of water, as an enema twice a day. And in about a week, his symptoms had largely cleared up. Then we switched him to just taking oral charcoal and stopped the enemas. Within a month, he went back for a repeat colonoscopy, and the doctor gave him a clean bill of health because he had cleared up all the ulcers in his colon. And that's been 10 years ago now, and he's still doing fine. Another lady came to me, and she was suffering from an eye condition called pars planitis. It's an inflammation and autoimmune disease of the back of the iris area. And the patient was definitely struggling because she'd had this for 2 years. First, the doctors had given her eye drops that were steroids. She would put these steroid eye drops in each of her eyes 3 times a day. Well, the steroid eye drops caused glaucoma. Since she had glaucoma, then they put her on a second set of eye drops, and that was after a year of the steroid drops. So at the end of 2 years, she'd been on these 2 types of drops, one for glaucoma and one for pars planitis with the steroids. And at that point, the drops weren't working at all. One of the interesting things about this case was as soon as she got pars planitis, then she started seeing halos around lights, sort of a blurriness when she saw a bright light. And the drugs never took away the blurriness. Well, when she came to me, the doctors had offered to give her something called methotrexate, a very strong anti-cancer drug to help her with her eyes. And she figured out she didn't want to do that, so she came to talk to me. Well, we had her doing a number of interesting things, but one of which is what Julie mentioned that Ellen White says about using a charcoal fomentation to the eyes. We had her put a cold fomentation to the eyes while doing a hot foot bath. We had her do that 20 minutes twice a day. And then we had her doing warm and cool compresses to her eyes at another time during the day, twice a day. She said within 3 days of starting that program, with good diet, lifestyle, and 8 natural remedies, then the halos that she'd seen around lights for 2 years went away. At the end of the week, when she went back to the ophthalmologist and had the pressure checked in her eyes and the inflammation, the ophthalmologist found out that her pressure was fine in her eyes and that the inflammation was going away quite quickly. Well, he gave her an appointment to come back in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, she came back. When she came back, she got her eyes checked, and the pressure was fine, and the inflammation was all but gone. And the ophthalmologist says, wow, that's wonderful. That methotrexate sure works wonders. Well, at that point, she told him, well, I'm not taking the methotrexate. Can I tell you what I am doing? And he says, well, I guess you better. So she told him all about the program she was on with the charcoal fomentations to the eyes and so forth. And he was like, well, I don't know about this. Let me see you back in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, she came back to him, and she's pretty much totally over her glaucoma and her pars planitis. Well, he wanted to send her off to a super subspecialist in Boston. Well, she said, I'll go, but I'm not going to take any drugs. So she went down to the super subspecialist in Boston, and he looked in her eyes and said, what are you doing in my clinic? I only see patients with pars planitis, and you don't have pars planitis. So she asked him if he wanted to know how she fixed it. And he tolerated a little bit of her story, but sent her out without much interest.
I told her not to tell it to the other
I
patients.
told her not to tell the other patients. Well, I don't know if that's right, but anyway, we can open it up for questions if you like, and you can also go to the website charcoalremedies.com and learn more as well. So, any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Clark, and also thank you, Sister Julie, for that very informative session on charcoal. I didn't realize that charcoal had so many different potential uses. I remember using charcoal for my dental patients who came in with pericoronitis, an inflammation of the gum when maybe their third molar was erupting, and they would have food lodged in it, and I would use charcoal poultices that I would advise them to be able to do. And within 3 days, their condition would subside versus having to be able to flush it out and having to be able to put them on antibiotics for several days. But yeah, charcoal is phenomenal. I know we use charcoal for my mother's gangrenous foot due to diabetes, and we mixed a little bit of cayenne pepper in the thing, and it helped to be able to bring down her inflammation, her swelling for her diabetic foot. But yeah, there's numerous uses of charcoal. Just a couple of questions. There was one that came in. Jenny wants to know, do we recommend taking charcoal regularly as a preventative measure or only when we need to treat a problem?
If you're taking some kind of medication, it'll absorb the medication and take it out of your body. But if you're not taking any kind of medication, just like those animals did better in Julie's presentation, I don't see why human beings wouldn't do better also. There's a bit of a myth out there, the idea that if you take charcoal, it'll take some vitamins out of your body. But there's no evidence of that, and it doesn't end up doing that in animals that are fed it. And also, dialysis patients who are having their blood run against charcoal don't end up with some glaring nutritional deficiency. So if you want to take it all the time, I mean, there's no prohibition to that, and I don't know of any downside. Now, personally, I'm one of those people that if I take very much of it, I do end up with a tendency toward constipation. So if I have to take very much of it, then I try to take something along with it, like psyllium husk powder. If I was to take a tablespoon of charcoal powder, then I would add a teaspoon of psyllium husk powder to it to keep from getting constipated.
All right, phenomenal. Just a quick question with regard to how much of charcoal is good. Now, I know that Sister Julie had a slide there that talked about 3 tablespoons 4 times a day. I think it was 2 tablespoons 3 times a day for 4 weeks to be able to treat a certain condition. I was wondering, is that the standard dose that we would be able to administer for someone who has chronic conditions?
Well, I think that's kind of a high dose myself. Most of the time, I suggest quite a bit less. The study didn't really look at dosing amounts. It just used that particular dose and reported the results. The results were as good as a statin drug dose as far as lowering cholesterol, which was what their goal was. But just the fact that they used that much without any particular reports of side effects says that you can use that much if you want to. For a lot of people, I have them take a teaspoon of charcoal powder in a quart of water, people with chronic conditions, and I usually have them take it mid-morning with their mid-morning water. And I haven't had any reports of any bad outcomes. And it's a good detox. It'll take heavy metals out of your body. It'll pick up organic compounds. There's whole books written on how much of different drugs, what percentage of different drugs it will absorb, especially for the ER docs. And if you want to take it regularly, I personally just keep a bit of it in, people will, you go to a pharmacy and you can buy these little pill jars that you can put on your keychain. Well, I get one of those and I just fill it full of charcoal. So I got, probably 12 charcoal tablets in my little keychain thing. And so if you're at a really, really bad potluck or fellowship meal, well, or you've been out to eat or something, and your stomach's not too happy, well, then sometimes you have to take more pills than it might seem obvious. 3, 4, 5 is probably a good place to start if you're experiencing any stomach upset from something you ate. But the dosing is a wide range, and I've had people with certain colon conditions that I was pushing them to take 2 tablespoons 3 times a day just for the colon condition, and they didn't get constipated at all, even though they weren't adding psyllium to it. In fact, we were trying to overcome diarrhea. And what I tell people with diarrhea is if you have diarrhea and it's not getting better, every time you have diarrhea, take another tablespoon of charcoal in a cup of water. and at some point you'll catch up to it, and solve that problem.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you should say that, Dr. Clark, because when traveling to India, we have serious issues because obviously our stomach needs to adjust to the water there, even having grown up in India. But whenever we travel back, we do have uh, serious digestive issues. And taking charcoal helps. And I like what you just mentioned right now. I'd like to emphasize that you said take charcoal every time you have a diarrhea or a loose stool. So that would definitely help. So that's important for us because I know there are people who have taken just a little charcoal and say, "Oh, it doesn't work." So yeah, it's consistency and I think persistence that also helps to be able to make sure that we have adequate amount of treatment in that regard. Another quick question, Dr. Clark, is if there's a difference between activated versus regular charcoal. Can we just burn up coconut shells and use them versus having to be able to try and find activated charcoal, which in some remote corners of the world are probably difficult to be able to find? Or is there a way that we can make our own activated charcoal?
Yes, you can use any kind of charcoal product out there. I was at the supermarket the other day and they were selling 100% hardwood charcoal chips to be used in a barbecue. I'm not talking charcoal briquettes, but this is just basically chips of wood that have been charcoalized or incinerated in the absence of oxygen. And I've done that before, bought a 10-pound bag and used it to decontaminate something like a one time it was a suitcase that I thought smelled bad, so I put a bunch of charcoal in it for a time. You can use that in your own water filtration if you want. The difference between activated and unactivated is that the activated has a little more surface area and it takes less of it to do the same amount. But if you're out in the woods and you got bit by a snake and you look around and the closest charcoal is a lightning struck tree, go to the lightning struck tree and chip off the black stuff and mix it with water and put it on the snake bite. That's certainly a good thing. And you can, just like those monkeys going around and picking up chips of charcoal out of, abandoned fires, it'll work. You can use it. Another thing you can do if you're, in civilized area and you want charcoal and you have a hard time finding it, the charcoal that Julie mentioned for aquariums is often good. Now, there is charcoal out there being used for some projects that is bone meal charcoal or bone charcoal. It actually has good absorptive properties, but for me personally, I wouldn't want to be using bone charcoal, at least internally. Probably not topically, but anyway, you can go to the aquarium shop or Walmart aquarium area. I've done this, and you can buy, it's usually more granular than powder. But there's good things for, granular charcoal makes a really good charcoal for those, like the eye fomentations I was talking about. A fomentation is a bag of charcoal. The granular stuff is less likely to leak out of a bag. And so you can get the granular charcoal there. A lot of places, a lot of, pharmacies or drugstores will sell charcoal tablets or capsules. It's sort of an expensive way to get very much charcoal, but it's available, and that's another way to get it. If you want to make your own charcoal, so right now we have a wood burning stove, and if we took and opened it up and used tongs and picked out a live coal and dropped it in a bucket of water, that would basically be the charcoal you'd want, and it might even get a little bit activated going in the water. If you want to make charcoal, you sell those big beehive ovens. You don't have to make a beehive oven, but what they do in Africa, which you could do in India, is they'll dig a hole. Let's just say, just for argument's sake, the hole's about a foot deep and 3 feet in diameter. And they would put charcoal, not charcoal, they put wood chips in the hole, and then they would put a piece of metal over the hole, either an old car, hood, or a piece of roofing steel or anything that's a metal, that you can put over the hole, and then they'll build a bonfire on top of the metal, and they'll basically incinerate the wood chips in that pit down to charcoal. Some places in Africa, they're doing this just to make charcoal for other people to have their barbecue, or to have a what do they call it? Turbo stove or rocket stove. They'll use it for rocket stoves. But that's the way you make charcoal, is heating wood in the absence of oxygen. And that way you're incinerating it down just to the carbon structure, and it's the charcoal that's good. So any charcoal's good, but the more activated it is, the more likely it is to need less of it to accomplish the same thing.
So what activates the charcoal then? Would just heating that thing up release its ability to be able to have more surface area?
What they do to activate it commercially is they subject it to high pressure steam. And this is what fractures the surface further to create more surface area. I don't know if you can do that at home with a charcoal or not. It would take some research to find out what their process is, and then to try to attempt to reproduce it, and then to see, what would be the results. But that said, it's no problem just to take extra of the unactivated stuff if you have that. I mean, Ellen White was working with non-activated charcoal. I'm sure it was just, or she told him to go to the blacksmith and pick up what he had left over from his work.
Yeah. Amen, Dr. Clark. I know that there were medical missionary workers who worked in some remote corners of India that went to people's fire pit and then got their charcoal from their home fire pits and made sort of treatments for their children who had food poisoning. I know it definitely works. Well, thank you again, Dr. Clark, Sister Julie, for that phenomenal study on charcoal. And I think, like was mentioned, each home should have charcoal. I don't think we need to be able to go without having that sort of precautionary measure that is there. And I love the fact that she used statistics to show us that in Kentucky, how treatment time has actually been reduced when people followed simple remedies at the home. And I pray that the world would catch on, and they are catching on to remedies that the Lord has blessed his people with. I don't see any other questions come in, Dr. Clark. Hopefully, if there are any, I can be able to send them your way for us to answer at another meeting. But thank you again. I want to be able to thank again Sister Julie for. Was there a question for Dr. Clark?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
I know you mentioned that there is no, you don't think that any vitamins or minerals leave your body when you're exposed to charcoal. I mean, I use charcoal, and I have found personally that, if you're not eating a wholesome diet, then you do feel like, your ankles hurt, and, because you lose potassium, sodium, or calcium. So is there a specific diet that you prescribe? I know you said that you didn't find anybody who has had that.
Yes, well, a diet to prescribe. If you look back at our presentations where we did the talk on lifestyle choices, you'll find that you'll have all the good diet that you need by following that. Where we're looking at the whole day and applying 8 natural doctors and then a good diet. And like you say, a deficient diet isn't going to help you. I heard about one study where they looked at taking charcoal and they compared eating good fruits and vegetables for your vitamins, and they compared that to taking vitamin pills. And they discovered that if they took vitamin pills, the charcoal pulled out most all the vitamin pill stuff because it was all toxins, but the food vitamins that came from natural fresh fruits and vegetables, it didn't pull out. So I thought, that's one I heard about. I didn't actually read that one myself, but one of my medical missionary friends told me about that.
Okay, I would really like to read that article because it's so hard to convince people, today. If you find it, please send it over. I would like to read that article. But that makes sense, that makes sense because of the vitamins in foods are non-toxic. So that should not be pulled out by charcoal. So that makes more sense. Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. It's interesting. Charcoal seems to be that selective. It's almost, it's God's remedy. It's supernatural, but.
Pretty intuitive. Didn't we talk about charcoal being used for COVID, Dr. Clark? Was there something that you want to reiterate about the use of charcoal for COVID treatments?
Absolutely, yes. As a remedy for COVID, it has a number of benefits. It does trap viral particles on its surface. In the virology labs, they use it to trap viruses and to capture them and to hold them. So it can do that. It's also very good at actually absorbing the cytokines. See, the problem with the COVID and the spike protein is that it stimulates the release of cytokines, which are inflammatory mediators. And when those inflammatory mediators get released, then they cause all kinds of problems. But studies show that the charcoal will absorb the cytokines. So that's the way it reduces the inflammation. And of course, Ellen White talked about it taking inflammation out of hands and out of the abdomen and so forth. And so this would be medical science showing that it does the same thing, combating the effects of COVID to cause cytokine storm. So it's a very important thing to have on hand. If you think you're coming down with COVID or any cold or flu or a respiratory tract infection, then you drink some charcoal water and gargle it, or very beneficial.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Clark. I know that people have actually made a lot of money with this. I think Sister Julie mentioned that. I know that Life Straw uses activated charcoal and the ion exchange filter to be able to, they swear that we could be able to drink any water anywhere and it filters out even those microscopic bacteria and viruses as well. Interesting. But thank you, Dr. Clark, again, and Sister Jolie for your presentation. Please stay on. Go ahead, sir.
I might mention, you go to YouTube and there's a very interesting video showing how to purify water. What they do is they take a standard water plastic bottle and they cut the top off of it, and then they fill it with charcoal and they put holes in the bottom of it, and then they run their water through just charcoal from a fire pit through this bottle, and then they pour it into another bottle, and by the time they get it to another bottle, the water's looking quite clear, and then they take that water bottle and they put a lid on it and they put it out in the sun for a whole day, and between the charcoal and the sun, it kills all the microbes and cleans out all the toxins, and then they can drink the water.
Yeah, phenomenal. Sunlight is a natural purifier as well, desensitizer. But
So you put a plastic bottle in sunlight?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And you're okay with that?
Right. I mean, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and all you have is a plastic bottle and you're dehydrating.
Okay.
well, thank you, Dr. Clark. I hope that you and Sister Julie get better too, and want to be able to let our viewing audience know that we have a cooking demonstration shortly after this. So please stay on. Thank you again, Dr. Clark. God bless you and your ministry too. Hi, Sister Gloria. We are ready for you now.
Hello and good evening, good morning. It's nice to be back again here. I hope all of you are doing well and the situation in India is getting better. So today we're going to talk about beans. Before we go on over to beans, I can testify myself using charcoal. I have used charcoal several times. I do have a very sensitive stomach, and every time we travel, it's something that goes with me, charcoal. It doesn't matter, I went to Canada or anywhere in America, or of course in India. I always have stomach problems and I end up taking charcoal. Depending on how severe I have the stomach pain and how often I have to use the bathroom, I take 3 to 4 times a day. Half a teaspoon of charcoal will do for me, like in a cup of water. But if it's not that bad, maybe once a day would do as well. And I always take it like an hour to a little, maybe more than an hour before eating your meal, and then you're good to eat your meal, and then take the charcoal, and it fixes the problem real quick. So charcoal is easily available here, though. So when we were in India, it wasn't that easily available, and we even made charcoal with coconut shells, just burning them when it was an emergency one time. So it really helps. All right, now going back to rice that we learned about the previous week, I just wanted to reiterate on rinsing rice well, especially rice grown in United States, because it is sometimes contaminated with arsenic, and so you want to soak your rice and rinse it so it helps get rid of the arsenic. And then I know it's a common practice here in America when they cook rice, they could add salt and butter. I honestly think that salt and butter is not needed to add to cooking while cooking rice, because rice will taste flavorful if you have something to eat with, like beans that we're going to talk about today. And one thing I forgot to mention is generally rice is gluten-free. So if in case, you know, you have, you need to be on a gluten-free diet, rice will make a good choice. All right, so that was about rice. And now we're going to learn today a little bit about beans. So beans are seeds of several flowering plant family called Fabaceae. Which is, I can put it down here. Sorry. Which are used as vegetable for human and animal consumption. They are also called as pulses. And I think the smaller seed is also called as legumes, but I think the words are used interchangeably. Beans are among the most versatile and commonly eaten foods around the world. Beans have the potential to improve the diet quality and also increase or long-term health benefits for those who consume beans regularly. And I would like to pause and make sure that you all have my PowerPoint today, since last time we lost it.
We can see your slides.
Thank you. All right. So coming to nutrients that we get from beans, they are high protein, complex carbohydrates, and they're rich in fiber, folate, and iron. Benefits of eating beans reduces disease risk factors like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, obesity, and of course it also promotes healthy weight in children. Beans are vegan for those who want to eat vegan diet or prefer vegan diet. and they can also be good vegetarian diet, and they are gluten-free as well. And then they are budget friendly, and they are poor man's food in India and other countries like Africa, maybe other parts of the world as well. Now, a lot of places, staple food is beans and rice, like in maybe Central America. And colored beans are high in antioxidants, like the red beans, brown beans, and black beans. And some antioxidants can be lost while cooking, but significant amounts are still present in the beans after cooking them. I do know and have talked and heard about the problem of flatulence with beans, and it is pretty common. So many edible beans contain oligosaccharides. It's a sugar molecule that's also found in cabbage. Normal human digestive tract does not contain any anti-oligosaccharide enzymes. So when we consume foods containing oligosaccharides, so they're typically digested by the bacteria in our large intestines. And so that produces the gas. So the process of digestion of these oligosaccharides by the bacteria produces the intestinal gas. So tips for reducing flatulence. So if you eat beans, remember to drink more water, and also use hot soak method, which we will go over it in a little bit when you soak your beans. And change water several times. Discard the water when, which releases some of the carbohydrates, which is the part that causes the gas. Rinse canned beans if you choose to use canned beans. You may also consider taking gas-reducing enzyme tablets. I'm not sure if it works, but charcoal is another option that you could use. Of course, when you take charcoal, you always have to take it at a separate time from when you eat and when you take your medications. So it has to be taken at a different time than at the same time as your food, because then charcoal will absorb all the nutrients from your food. I need to get the thing up because you can only see my neck. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Beans in diet. So main dishes, chili, burgers, and they can be used as on rice, like we said earlier, and also with flatbread or rotis that we eat a lot in India. Side dishes, great addition to any meal. Just cook beans, flavored beans with different seasonings that we will look at. So they can be eaten with, just some chips and beans and as a side. And then salads, you can put them in, cook them well, and you can add to your salads and salsas. And then they can also be added to pasta. They make a good addition to pasta. And these days, we have, at least we're fortunate to get them here in the America, beans or the pastas made with beans, like they make with edamame, and I have seen with red lentils, and then garbanzo beans as well. So they're beans themselves. So you could just add some vegetables to them when you cook those pastas that are made with beans already. And beans can also be used in soups, dips, and spreads, in also in baking. Sorry, I think, all right, we're back with that slide PowerPoint. So you can also add beans, cooked beans, as a part or all of the fat content that you may have to use in your brownies and in your cookies. So instead of the fat, you can use cooked beans. So blend them up and then you could use them. So how to cook beans? Place dry beans. So there are 3 different methods that I have learned about while I was researching. And so the first one is place dry beans in a large pot with a lot of water. So like for 2 cups of beans, you might want to put 6 or 8 cups of water and boil for, bring it to a boil and then boil for 2 to 3 minutes. Remove from heat and let stand for 1 hour. Drain the water and rinse. So I believe after you do this process, they're ready to be consumed, according to the place where I got this information from. And then the advantages are less cooking time and less planning required. Like if in a short time, if you plan to make some beans, then this would be a good choice. Again, the screen is. The other kind, and the disadvantages of that is fermentation may take place if left too long in hot water, and loss of nutrients as well. And the second type is, again, soak in cold water for 8 hours, wash and discard water, rinse beans in cold water, and then pressure cook in Instapot for 40 minutes, or in a regular pressure cooker like commonly used in India and elsewhere. You could cook in it for like 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the kind of bean you're using. If the bean is a smaller size and a softer kind, it may not need 15 minutes. It may cook in shorter time. And then the third method is soak in hot water by bringing to a boil and boil for 2 to 3 minutes. Then remove from heat and let it stand for 4 to 24 hours. And drain beans and rinse out with fresh cold water. And that's it. And it should be done cooking. So advantages of that is it reduces cooking time, and then also helps reduce gas-producing compounds. Beans are tender. And then disadvantages are long soaking time and requires some planning. About anti-nutrients, there are some anti-nutrients with these, generally with beans. Many types of beans contain significant amount of anti-nutrients that inhibit an enzyme process in the body. Like the phytic acids and the phytates present in grains, nuts, seeds, and beans interfere with bone growth and vitamin D metabolism. Like we said, presence of phytic acid prevents calcium absorption. So I guess it eventually prevents vitamin D absorption. And so that's how bone growth and vitamin D metabolism can be affected. And you should be aware or be cautious that there could be toxins in beans, and especially if they're not cooked properly. And then bacterial infections are possible with bean sprouts. So we just have to be cautious with that as well. And then my way of cooking beans. So we kind of eat beans almost every day, one kind of bean every day. And it is better that we choose one kind of bean instead of using multiple beans at one meal. And maybe at times we could use like 3-bean salad or 5-bean salad, something like that. But in general, it's ideal to use just one kind of bean every day. So how I cook my beans is I wash my beans in filtered water and I soak them. You could soak anywhere between 8 to 12 hours or even up to 16 hours. Basically in the afternoon, if you soak in the day at lunchtime, and then you change water before you go to bed at nighttime, and in the morning, then you can change water and put them for cooking. Rinse beans in cold water before cooking. Again, after you soak them, just before cooking, you want to throw out that water and then put fresh water for cooking. And you just want to put water enough to cover the beans, and cook it in crock pot, Instapot. I use Instapot for 40 minutes under pressure. And then suggested seasonings that you can use in while cooking beans, so that way it's just ready when it's done cooking. Is you can add salt to taste. Of course, we want to not add too much. Garlic powder, onion powder, dry basil, dry parsley, coriander powder, cumin powder, bay leaves, or any other preferred seasonings, and or any combinations of these. And they have great taste when you give them a little bit seasoning to it. And it depends also what kind of beans you use, so how you can season them. So there are different varieties of beans, and we can look at the beans that we have here. The darker color beans have more antioxidants. I don't have too many beans here, but I do have some that you will be able to see. So this is the red kidney beans. These are lighter in color. And these are darker kidney beans. And then there are some beans that are smaller red beans as well, but I don't have them on the table here. And these are black beans, typically used here in America. And these are horse gram, is what we call in India, but they're also a bean. And this is also black bean, but the Indian variety, but the peel has been removed. And this is the one that we use mostly for making idlis and dosas and all of our favorite items in India. And these are black eye beans. These are mung beans. They're too close. And these are soybeans. And peas. Peas are a very good source of protein, and it has become a health food now, the dry peas. I know mostly in America people use frozen peas, fresh frozen peas, but the dry beans actually have more protein compared to most of the beans, as well as soybeans, of course. And these are yellow peas, but I did not have the beans, but I mean the whole pea, but I have the split kind. So this is the yellow peas basically. So once we split it, it becomes the lentil. And this is the dark brown garbanzo. It's a smaller kind, and this is more of like an Indian variety that we don't get in American stores. And then the last one that I have here is the favorite garbanzo beans. These are the actual big size ones, and they're used in way too many different ways in cooking. Well, that is what I have on my beans today. And if anyone has any comments or suggestions, I would be happy to hear.
Thank you, Sister Gloria, again for another phenomenal food demonstration. I know that beans is considered to be poison in the pot for a lot of people because they're afraid of, like you mentioned, the after effects of eating beans. So we want to be able to encourage people to be able to eat a lot of food in its natural state. And I like the fact that you mentioned it's important for us to be able to wash and soak the beans. We were just talking about how sometimes we forget to be able to wash the beans before we soak them. And I think it's imperative for us to be able to wash them as well. Just a quick question now. I know that there are some products of milk being made from some of these beans. Is there any comments about the milk products that can be made out of some of these seeds?
I
all
am
the
not
beans.
familiar with that process, Melvin.
I know we use soya milk. We make soy milk out of the soy beans. So, do I think that that's something that we can be able to consider. I was just a little concerned about the sprouts that you mentioned that could have a bacterial uh, possibility on that. Now, is there something for us to be concerned about? Because we do a lot of sprouts here at home. Wondering if that's something that we can be able to overcome somehow.
I think when it comes to sprouts, as long as you use them before they go bad, or if, because they need the moisture and the warm temperature, sprouts tend to grow some mold in them that is not visible at all times. So that is a concern, and you have to be just careful eating sprouts. They do say that sprouts are higher in protein and nutrition. So it's a good thing to include. But I think cooking sprouts also is okay. It doesn't have to be eaten raw, from what I have read in the past, but I could be wrong on that. Um, yeah. But yeah, when it comes to making milk, yeah, I remember making milk in India while we were there with soybeans. But after coming here to America, it's so easy to find soy milk, which is organic and it has nothing but soybeans and water, filter water. So that's so much easier to pick up from the shelf, and it is organic and it is just soybeans and water. So it's a lot less work because it does take a lot of work to make soy milk. I think they have those little soy milk makers. I really didn't need to buy one yet since we have this milk available. I can say we're blessed though.
I know we used to make soy milk in India as well for our kids, just so that they could have something that they could be able to mix in their recipes with. But yeah, I was also going to ask if beans can be mixed with fruit or vegetables, considering that they are seeds. Would you want to be able to comment about mixing fruit and vegetable with worries about a lot of people having with beans?
From my little research that I did for this presentation, I learned that it's actually in the first slide, it says that they are vegetables. Their beans are considered vegetables. And I see it because it's coming after the flower. So I guess if I understand it right, then we eat it with vegetables because they're vegetables. But Dr. Clark can throw some light on it. I'm not sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, we take them either way, and we treat them as seed ourselves. Part of it is just seeing what works for you personally. Some people can't handle beans, period, and then some people live on beans. But as far as botanically, they're basically a seed rather than actually a fruit or vegetable. Fruit tends to be the mature polycarp or ovum of a flower, and a vegetable tends to be the root, stem, or leaf. But these things are basically the seed. We call them beans, but they're really a seed. So part of it's trial and error on each person's part, and there's no real prohibition to using them either way that I know of, as opposed to the problems we see from mixing fruit and vegetables.
Well, thank you, Dr. Clark.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good,
These are
Dr.
available.
You're
Clark.
welcome.
Thank you, Sister Gloria. And beans are available around the world, like you mentioned. So we can definitely make use of these high energy foods that is available for us. And they're a whole meal in itself, like you mentioned. And we have tried different recipes with them. And maybe people can be able to send in some of their recipes that they tried with some of these beans. But thank you, Sister Gloria. As of always, we appreciate your active interest in giving us a knowledge of some of these considered taboos that a lot of people stay away from. All right. Thank you very much for being here. Those of you who have joined us, we want to be able to welcome you back to come back next Saturday for another one of our presentations with Dr. Clark and a cooking demonstration with Sister Gloria. Well, God bless you and have a pleasant evening and a pleasant day if you're calling in from the other side of the world.
Thank you.